3 of them came out of the sun at once. He never saw the first. He felt it, a tearing along the left wing, high up near the shoulder where the membrane is thinnest, and then the sky stopped holding him. He was 800 feet across the wings. He had held a road for 300 years. Nothing in the world had ever hurt him, and it took 3 younger dragons working together about 90 seconds. That was the day Valyria learned something it could never unlearn, and every dragon that died afterward died in the shadow of it. This is the Black Dread. Subscribe if you would fly high on a sky shrieker. 10 dragons, 4,000 years, the greatest beasts the Freehold ever put in the sky, and the exact circumstances of each one's death. Some of them you would expect, most of them you would not. And by the end, the order they died in tells you something about Valyria that no history of Valyria will. We go in sequence. Oldest first. Start before the wars. Aelythrax was a white titan, 1,300 feet across the wings, pale as bone, of a breed already going extinct while she was still flying. The Keeper's rolls put her with House Mariner, and they give her 2 riders across 200 years, Lord Rhaemar Mariner, and after him, his daughter Saegra. She never fought a war, not one. That is the whole point of her. What she did was fly the coast, slow patrols along the shoreline of what would one day be called Slaver's Bay, in the era when Old Gis was the greatest power in the world, and Valyria was a cluster of shepherd families with something terrible living in their mountains. Gis raided that coast for slaves. It was cheap and it was easy, and it had gone on for centuries. Then a white shape started appearing over the water. The Giscari did not fight her. They did something far more consequential. They stopped raiding and started building walls, garrisons, fortifications along the whole bay. An empire that had never needed to defend itself began, for the first time in its history, to take defense seriously. Every one of the 5 wars that followed was fought against those walls.
Aelythrax
died of old age. No wound, no enemy, no battle. She simply got old and stopped, and the chronicles record that her death came shortly after the last of the great white skeletons was found lying in a vent cavern in the mountains. The priests called the 2 deaths together the fading of the pale. She was the last living white colossus ever. After her, that line is gone from the record entirely. So the first entry on this list is a dragon who killed nobody and whose only recorded achievement was frightening an empire into getting ready. Which brings us to the wars themselves, and to the largest saddled dragon in the pale line. Valryth, 1,450 feet across the wings, bonded to House Valar, ridden first by Lady Vhaela Valar, and later by Corin Valar. She flew in the first, the second, and the third Giscari War, and she was Valar's supreme siege asset for the better part of 4 centuries. Here is what the rolls say about her, and it is easy to read past. Most of the cities she was sent against surrendered before she burned anything. Not after a siege, not after a demonstration. The registers say they capitulated at the sight of her shadow on the ground. Think about what that actually means as a job. She was not a weapon that got used. She was a weapon that got shown. Season after season, war after war, she was flown out, walked across a sky where a city could see her, and flown home. Hundreds of miles at a time, carrying armor and a rider and the weight of her own body, and then hundreds of miles back, so that a magister somewhere could look up and decide he would rather live. And that is what killed her. There is no battle in her death entry. What the chronicles record is accumulated injury and overuse. She came home from the Third War, and she did not recover. She died in the Valar mountain hangar, in the dark, from 400 years of being the thing that made surrender look reasonable. Valyria did not lose her. It wore her out. And that word, overuse, is going to come back before we are finished. Now hold the wars for a moment, because the 3rd dragon on this list never really left one building. Draevomar was an Embermaw of the Forjefuri line, 520 feet, bonded to House Rhaemarion of Oros. His rider was Maris Rhaemarion, who the chronicles call the Bellows Lord. And the name is not a joke, it is a job title. Embermaws were not siege breeds, they were precision breeds. Where a colossus was a wall of fire, an Embermaw could hold a flame at an exact temperature for as long as you needed it held, and Draevomar was the prototype of the whole class. The rolls credit him with being able to shift his breath to the specific heat a given alloy required. He almost never flew to war. He was too valuable. What he did instead was stand over the forge halls of Oros for 400 years and make the Freehold steel. Every blade carried in the Giscari Wars, every ballista bolt, every rivet, every fused stone in the great roads. There is a real argument, and the chronicles come close to making it outright, that Draevomar killed more Giscari than any dragon that ever crossed the Gulf of Grief, and he did it without ever seeing one. He died in his sleep, above the forge halls, at the end of 4 centuries, in the middle of the night, and the detail the record preserves is the last breath. Not a roar, not a death cry, just a long exhalation, the kind an old animal makes settling down, hot enough that it scorched the ceiling of the hall into a dome of glass that was still standing generations later, and that the forge workers under it went on working beneath every day. They kept the roof, they kept the dome he made dying, and they made steel under it. 3 dragons in, and not one has been killed by anything. Old age, exhaustion, and sleep. So when does that change? Here. This is where it changes. Urrax the Demon Hammer was an obsidian colossus, 787 feet, bonded to House Qogarys and ridden by Qogarys, and afterward by Saegrax. He fought in the 5th Giscari War, the one that ended with the walls of Old Gis pulled down, the pyramids burned to cinder, and the fields sown with salt and sulfur and skulls, so that there could never be a 6th. And then he came home and did the thing he is actually remembered for. He took the road. The great Valyrian road that runs east through the mountains, fused stone, straight as a drawn line, and for close to 300 years, Urrax the Demon Hammer was the toll. He held that road against everything that came at it. The rolls credit him with breaking at least 3 major slave risings and a string of rebellions by cities that thought a road that long could not be watched everywhere at once. It could. He was the reason. He was, for 3 centuries, the most consistently feared living thing in Essos, and nothing had ever come close to killing him, because nothing on the ground could reach him, and nothing in the air had ever tried. Then the families turned on each other. The chronicles call it the First Sky War. Not Valyria against a foreign empire, but Dragon Lord against Dragon Lord over roads and tolls and air lanes and precedents. And in that war, somebody worked out the arithmetic that nobody had bothered with in 4,000 years of dragons. A colossus is enormous. A colossus is also slow to turn, and the membrane of a dragon's wing, the part that holds it up, is, near the shoulder, thinner than a man's hand. 3 smaller war dragons climbed above him and came down out of the sun together, not one after another. And they did not go for his throat or his belly or any of the places a beast that size is armored. They went for the wings, and they kept going for the wings, and they tore the membranes to pieces. He came down on the road he had held for 300 years, that he had defended against every uprising Essos could organize. He hit it hard enough that the chronicles bother to record where, and every dragon lord in the Freehold heard about it inside a month. Because Urrax the Demon Hammer's death was not just the loss of a great dragon, it was a proof. It demonstrated publicly and beyond argument that the largest creature in the world could be killed by 3 smaller ones if they were willing to coordinate and knew exactly where to bite. Everything that comes after this on the list happens in a world that knows that. Rhaemarion of House Rhaemor was an obsidian colossus of 820 feet, ridden across 400 years by Lord Rhaenor Rhaemor, and after him, 2 of his sons. His speciality was gates, 17 of them. The rolls credit him with the destruction or surrender of 17 city gates, which made him, by the plain measure of the thing, the most successful siege dragon in Valyrian history. City commanders across Essos feared him more than they feared armies, and reasonably so. An army you can starve. Rhaemarion arrived in the afternoon and your gate was gone by dark. When the First Sky War came, House Rhaemor brought him out as their trump card and pointed him at rival families' fortified areas. He died in the last year of that war, and he died to a plan. First, the ballistae. Not one battery. Concentrated fire, several positions, prepared in advance, and sighted to catch him where he would have to come. Bolts do not kill a colossus. They slow one. They make a creature that size stop climbing and start deciding. And while he was slowed, a stormclaw hit him. The chronicles are specific about this. The stormclaw was smaller than him, far smaller. The rider who flew it was not attempting to win an aerial duel, and was not, by any reading of the record, expecting to land afterwards. They rammed him, deliberately. Both of them went down. 400 years of Rhaemarion, 17 gates, an entire generation of siege doctrine, ended by one rider making a decision that took about 4 seconds. That is the second time on this list a great dragon has been killed. And the second time it was done by something smaller that had thought about it beforehand. Unless, of course, you sent something equally large. House Valar's answer to the whole problem was Vhaelyth, 740 feet, obsidian, ridden by Valyr. And unlike almost every dragon on this list, he was not bred for cities or roads or forges. He was bred to fight other dragons. The rolls describe him as the colossus most feared by other riders, which is a very different thing from the colossus most feared by other cities. In one campaign, he crippled or killed 3 dragons in direct aerial combat. He was the template, the record says so plainly, for anti-dragon tactics, and every rider in the Freehold who expected to meet him studied how. And then House Rhaemar sent Glaeryx. What the chronicles preserve is not a battle. It is a collision, 2 war dragons of comparable size coming at each other with the whole weight of themselves and neither one turning. The record calls it titanic and then does not elaborate, which I have always thought was the correct decision. There is no account of maneuver. There is no account of who had the advantage. There is a description of 2 beasts locking together in the air and coming apart on the way down, and both of them going into the water, the stretch of sea that later ages would call the Smoking Sea. Neither house got its dragon back. The chronicles note dryly that the loss ended a major phase of the war, which is a historian's way of saying both sides looked at the water and decided they had run out of pieces. 2 great houses of Valyria, hundreds of years of breeding on each side, and the outcome was a hole in the sea. We are 6 deep. Half of these dragons were killed by other dragons. So, is that just what Valyria became? No. And this is where the pattern turns again. Qogarys was a hybrid, colossus crossed with Stormclaw, 760 feet, bonded to House Qogarys and ridden by Daelra Qogarys. He is, by the rolls, the heaviest dragon ever recorded holding a stable hover in near hurricane wind, and that single capability made him irreplaceable, because the passes above Mantares are narrow and the weather there is violent, and whoever holds the air corridor above a pass holds everything that moves through it. In gales that grounded every other breed in the Freehold, Qogarys stayed up. He fought through the entire Second Sky War, doing exactly that, hanging in weather nothing else could survive, over a gap in the mountains, denying it to everyone else. He survived that war, came through it, went home, and then the ground opened underneath him. A volcanic vent collapsed beneath his lair while he was in it. That is the entire death entry. No enemy, no rival house, no ballista battery. A cavity in the rock that had been quietly hollowing itself out for however long such things take, giving way on an ordinary night. The detail that makes it stay with you is what they found. He was not crushed, and he was not burned in any way the chronicles thought worth describing. He was sealed. The molten rock came up and then cooled around him, and what the record describes is a colossus set inside a mass of fused black glass. The heaviest storm dragon in the history of the world, survivor of a war that killed better dragons than him, buried permanently by geology, in the dark, on a night when nothing was happening at all. The 8th is the one I would put to anyone who thinks these were just animals. Daelra was a sky shrieker, 400 feet, House Daelra, ridden by Rhaenor Daelra. Sky Shriekers were the Freehold's high air, scouts, signal carriers, the coordination layer that let dragon lords fight wars across hundreds of miles instead of one valley at a time. And Daelra's voice was a system. Her cry was distinctive enough that House Daelra built a code out of it. Different calls, different patterns, meaning different things. Enemy flight sighted, corridor clear, fall back, come now. In the Second Sky War, she was the reason Daelra's wings could move as one thing instead of several. She would go up into the dark and her cry would carry, and 100 miles of front would react to it. She was killed by that, Rival Stormclaw riders spent however long it took listening to her, not chasing her, listening, logging where the calls came from and when, and working out from the pattern where she would have to be and when she would have to be there. And then they climbed into a thunderhead, and they waited inside the cloud, and they let her come to them. She never saw them. The chronicles are clear that she was not hunted down, not run to exhaustion, not beaten in the air. She flew the route she had flown 1,000 times, calling as she went, and something came out of the weather that already knew her schedule. They did not kill her because they were faster, or larger, or braver. They killed her because they had been paying attention for a long time, and she had never once stopped talking. The ninth barely fits the pattern at all, which is exactly why he belongs here. Torathor was a Stormclaw of 385 feet, House Toranis, ridden by Jorah Toranis, and the two of them made their name in the Stepstones, that scatter of rocks and channels between the continents that has been full of pirates in every era anyone has bothered to write down. Their tactic was insane, and it worked. Rather than attack ships from above, where a dragon is visible for miles and every deck has time to bring something up, Torathor would perch on a headland, folded, still, indistinguishable from the rock, and wait for a pirate to round the point below. Then he would come off the cliff, not flying, but falling, wings half shut and open at the last possible moment. You do not see it coming. There is nothing in the sky to see. The rolls call him the quintessential anti-pirate Stormclaw, and the chronicles treat him as a hero of that whole war. He died doing it. One dive, in hurricane wind, misjudged, that is all. The record does not give him an enemy at the bottom of it, or an ambush, or a rival house. It says the winds were wrong and he read them wrong and he hit the water hard enough to shatter bone. A dragon bred specifically to survive violent air, killed by violent air, doing the maneuver he was famous for on a day the weather did not cooperate. 9 dragons. And I want you to notice how many of these deaths would have made a song, and how few of them did. The last one is the smallest dragon on this list, and the one that has stayed with me longest. Saegrax was an Embermaw of 300 feet, modest by these standards. He was not bonded to one of the great Dragonlord houses at all. He was attached to a kiln charter, a commercial concern on the western reach of Slaver's Bay, and his rider was a woman named Vhaelyrion. He never fought anyone. What he did for 300 years was work. The Freehold's roads and harbors were built of fused stone, and fused stone is made in kilns, and the kilns ran continuously, an unbroken industrial complex that Saegrax essentially never left. He stood in it, and he burned, on schedule, at temperature, for 3 centuries, so that the Empire could have roads. Every one of those roads carried something. Legions, grain, slaves. Every harbor those kilns paved received something. He is, quietly, one of the most consequential dragons in this entire video. And there is no war in his entry at all. And then one day, a chain failed. That is what the record says. A kiln chain fails catastrophically. The mechanism that held whatever it held in a facility where a dragon is producing furnace heat in the middle of a city, and suddenly, nothing is controlling it. Saegrax was going to burn. There was no version of that day where he did not. The question was only what he burned with him. And the chronicles record that Vhaelyrion got on him, and got him up, and pointed him at the water. Both of them went into the sea, on purpose. She could not save him, so she spent the last minutes she had making sure that when he went where nothing else would. That is the last entry on the list. Not a duel, not a war. A woman and a dying dragon flying out over the water, so a kiln town would still be there in the morning. So, 10 dragons, 4,000 years, and no single thing killing them. Age, exhaustion, rivals, ballistae, a vent, a cloud, a bad dive, a broken chain, which looks laid out like that, like nothing at all. Like a list of unrelated accidents across a span of time so vast that of course they have nothing in common. The first 3 died of themselves. Aelythrax of old age, Valryth of overwork, Draevomar in his sleep. Across 1,000 years and 5 wars against the greatest empire in the world, Valyria's supreme dragons could not be killed by anything Gis had. Not one of them was brought down by an enemy. The Giscari lost 5 wars, because there was, functionally, no way to kill these things. Then the Freehold ran out of geese, and the next 4 died to each other. Urrax the Demon Hammer, torn apart by 3 of his own kind. Rhaemarion, brought down by prepared batteries and a rider who rammed him. Vhaelyth and Glaeryx, annihilating one another over open water. Not one of those deaths happened in a war against a foreign power. Every one of them happened in a war between Dragon Lord families, over roads and tolls and precedents. And in the space of a couple of centuries, the Freehold taught itself the one thing no outside enemy had managed to work out in 4,000 years: how to kill a dragon. Nobody else did that to them. They did it to themselves, at speed, competing. And then look what happens at the end of the list. Qogarys, sealed in glass by a vent. Daelra, dead because someone listened to her schedule. Torathor, dead to weather. Saegrax, dead to a failed chain in a kiln. By the last stretch of the Freehold's history, its greatest dragons have stopped dying in wars entirely, because there is nobody left to fight. Gis is salted earth. The rivals have exhausted each other. What is left for a supreme dragon to do is hold a pass, carry a signal, watch a road, run a kiln. So they die the way infrastructure dies, quietly, in accidents. On ordinary days, doing routine work, from equipment failure and bad weather and rock that gave way. The greatest predators the world has ever produced, and the last entries in the register read like a foreman's incident report. There is a tapestry hanging in the Great Pyramid of Meereen, and it shows something the Valyrians never put in their own histories: the survivors of a defeated Valyrian army passing beneath the yoke, in chains. Gis kept that. For 5,000 years, in a city Valyria eventually burned, somebody kept a picture of the one time it went the other way. Valyria kept records too. Better ones, more of them. Every wingspan and toll road and kiln charter. 40 families, hundreds of dragons, 4,000 years of the most complete written civilization the world has ever produced. And nowhere in any of it did anyone write down what it was all for. They only ever wrote down what it cost.